All right. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Janice, she, her pronouns, and I am an organizer for this event, and we're very excited to be with each other in this space. And we just ask that people respect yourself and others and the space. And just a reminder to keep yourself on mute unless it's your turn to talk. And then this session is called Holding Creative Space for Self-Directed Learners with Adele Jarrett-Kerr. And I will now pass it over to Adele. Thanks.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, I was saying to Janice that Bria asked me for the information and I gave it in a hurry because there were a million things going on. And I've read it back and realized it's not very descriptive what this session is about. So thanks for coming anyway. And hopefully we'll all get a bit out of it together and exchange some ideas. I'm not showing up here as an expert by any means, and hopefully anybody who's doing this isn't. But it would be really great I want to hear from you as much as you hearing from me. So we will have some breakout rooms later on. And well, actually no, because there's so few of us, we'll just chat amongst each other, hopefully. Obviously, if you don't feel comfortable doing that, then do what you need to do. For the last year and a half, I've run a learning community called Soulcraft Learning Community. And the word soulcraft in this context came from a book called Farming While Black by Leah Penniman. And in it, she talks about this moment where she puts her hands in the soil after a long time of not gardening, because she was teaching science in primary school for a while. And then she gets back to it and she realizes that this is the thing that makes her come alive. And why did she ever leave it? And so that really stayed with me in a big way. And when it came time to name our learning community, it just seemed like the right word to bring to it, because that was essentially what we were hoping, that this could be a space where young people and the adults in it, all the learners in the space, so that's everybody of all ages, could find the thing which, while you're doing it, you feel like most yourself. And this is who I am. And that may not be one thing. It may be lots of different things, but the idea is to create a space where you have enough time and space to be thinking like that, rather than being rushed through lots of things. And I was actually chatting with some of the young people this week about this talk and asking them, what do they think the point of what we're doing is? And they said, like, regular time with our friends, time to do things together, time to get around to the things that we don't get around to when we're home, which I thought was interesting, because I had sometimes thought about that. Like, we do create a space for that, which is kind of what we're talking about here. And I had always thought of that as more like something that the adults had brought into the space, but particularly for the older ones, people sort of 11 plus, although some of the younger ones as well. This is something that they really valued, having a focused time where the things that they want to do were recognized and given time, and maybe people who I would say people who may be able to think in a different way, are able to hold space around it, or sort of say, like, let's do this now. You wanted to make time for this, reminding them to do that. But actually, I wouldn't say that it's only adults who are able to do that kind of executive function support, because I struggle to do it for myself. And actually, I find that young people are really good at supporting me in doing the things that I want to do. So that was one of the things that they said they like about Soulcraft, is that we make time for the things that we want to do, and it's supportive doing that together. And we've done this in a lot of different ways over the past year and a half. So we run as a big learning community for ages 5 to 14 currently, and anything could be happening at any time, which is beautiful in its own way, but it's also been really difficult to manage because we don't have a space that really allows for it. We don't really have enough adults to really support it. But nevertheless, we have been like trying to cut out times to be able to do some of this with the people who want to do it. So last year they put together this bird sign where it was all about how to rescue birds, and some people were involved in the research, some people were involved in the artwork, and then some people were involved in working out how to sell it, and it was like a group project that carried on for a couple of terms with all of the other stuff dancing around it. And a recent project is we've just put on an arts exhibition in a local art gallery, and it was completely like a lot of the feedback we got from a lot of the adults that it was quite violent. but I think that it was I thought it was really humorous, and I think that that's probably because I've spent time with the artists who were working on it. But these are things that have not been set by adults. These are things that have emerged from the young people themselves. And equally, the projects that we value in the space are Minecraft builds that people have like people have worked hard to work out how to create how to recreate things from The Hobbit, and supported with each other with that. Apparently building round things in a block world is quite challenging, which actually makes sense once they explained that to me. And all of that has value. Somebody else was trying to work out how to do tricks with finger skateboarding, and then a whole group came around that, helping to figure out all the different ways that could happen. And those kinds of projects, I find the word project a little bit tricky because people tend to associate that with school outcomes, where they're thinking about like a question that an adult has set, or some sort of, that it has been guided by an adult as opposed to emerging from the young people. But those kinds of projects, for lack of a better word, although I will use a better word in a minute, have sort of become the where we've decided we want to put the focus of what we're doing. And so actually going forward, we're about to become a space for an older group who wants to just focus on that in a more structured way, but in a structure that will be collaboratively and consensually created. And we've been piloting this with a third day, because we run 2 days a week with the whole big thing, but we've been piloting this a third day, and that's what we've been doing on the third day. And from that, things like films have been emerging, lots of digital art, somebody's working on an audiobook, that kind of thing, because it's a bit more of a calmer space that allows for that. And so we've sort of been saying that our shift in focus is on creativity, but all of it is creativity. Everything that a young person does, everything a person does, is creativity. But it's trying to help people to start to think about, like, what are we doing when we're together? How do we create a space that views you as a creative and values what you want to work on? And how for some people are going to need a little bit more of a planful space around that. So that's been our shift in focus. And instead of thinking about it in terms of projects, we've started using the language of storytelling. This is where my blurb was a bit garbled, but the idea is that every creativity is in everything. It's not just in the arts. It's anywhere where there's an idea, anywhere where you are applying critical thinking and you are working through a process that emerges from you is creativity. And that could be in science, it could be in just about anything, it could be in sport. But to be able to communicate it to somebody else, you're going to need to apply storytelling. So this is what gets called projects, but actually should probably be called storytelling instead, because it's about taking something that you care about and communicating it to somebody else in a way that that they can understand it and they can connect with it. And it's something that we all of us have to do. We have to do it sort of like painfully in job interviews, but maybe more enjoyably in getting people to join a cause that we care about, or to just understand what we're doing if we have a business, or it's a thing that we have to do when we're just trying to connect with connect with other people. It's a conversation that young people who may be a bit shyer start to learn the mechanics of when they're going into a bigger group and thinking about, how do I find the point of interest to connect with these strangers? You know, do we have TV shows that we both like? Could we recount an episode that we liked? And I feel that all of these things are things that are being practiced when we do these when we do the things that we're sort of working on in this more focused creative space that we're creating. And for us, it's I mean, this is sort of linked to what I was saying the word came from farming while black. I have a huge interest in gardening because I've started a farm a few years ago with my partner, and we use the principles of ungardening, which is the idea that you don't put any sprays, you don't dig unnecessarily, you don't do anything unnecessary that you've sort of been told in conventional farming that you have to do. And it really reflects the approach that we have to education as well. There's so much that we're being told that kids need, so many unnecessary things that we put in place, not just young people, but also for us as well. There's so many things that we feel that we have to do if we want to create something. So if we want to learn to write a song, you know, we might feel like we have to go through these steps. We have to find this teacher, we need to follow this structure. I can't play the guitar in this way, I can't hold it this way, because that's not the official way that it's supposed to be held, rather than feeling that we can find our own creative process with it. And there's a lot of things that we put into it when actually it could all be a lot simpler, basically. So what we're going to be talking about here is how do we, but also with gardening, that's being said, you do still have some things that you're not completely just leaving it and allowing the weeds to take over. There are some gentle things that you do to work with what is there. And the idea with this approach to self-directed education is that you're not obviously not just standing completely back and saying you go and do your thing then for yourself, but there are some gentle, natural ways that we can be human alongside other humans. So before we get into the idea of what could a planful creative space where you're not just creating the thing, but you're telling the story of the thing look like, I thought I'd throw out some questions for us to chat about. We were talking about going into breakout rooms. We don't really need it. There's only a few of us. So I reckon we can just go for this. So I have a few questions, well, for us to chat about. I'm not going to throw them all out at once. So we don't need to, because we're not going in breakout rooms. Hopefully some of you will feel able to chat. I know that lots of videos are off, but the question is, how could you benefit from a group that sees you as creative and values what you want to work on? So we'll just start with that one. I am a kind of person where I will forget straight away as soon as somebody says something, especially if it's a question. So I'm going to put it in the chat box. I feel like this is pushing me as a learner as well, because I'm going to hate looking back at this. In fact, I'm not going to look back at it.
Oh, I'm sending you love there, Adele. Hi, Adele. Nice to be in community with you here. I really appreciate this question, and it makes me quite emotional, actually, because I think I was drawn to this offering because I realized that I have some blockages in my own creative process. And so even like if we look at creativity through the lens of play, right? When I started facilitating, I would like choke up and freeze when I needed to facilitate play. And I've come a long way in that. But I realize, and why I get emotional is that this question of like, being surrounded by folks that actually honored my creativity as a young person didn't really exist. And so it was like my childhood was very serious. You know, I kind of was projected into a role of being an adult very early on. And ironically, both of my parents were artists. And so for them, because they were struggling artists, it was like, no, you don't want to do what we did, right? You don't want to follow the creative path because it didn't bring us success, quote unquote success. And so from my family, I got a lot of pressure to like follow a conventional school path. And I had all this creativity. I wanted to draw, I wanted to create, I wanted to make, but I wasn't in a group that actually could see that as valuable in terms of creating a happy future. And so I think right now I feel the most creative I ever have because I'm around young people and they're reminding me of that natural creativity that we all have when we're in community with people that just let it be. And so anyway, I have a lot more thoughts, but that's just it for now. And I just really appreciate this question because I want to open up. I want to be that person to others, and I want to like cherish being a community with people that also just give me space to be creative. So thank you.
I completely identify with what you said about feeling more creative being around young people. It's a it's a really lucky place to be in, and I identify. Natalie says, I resonate with the sense of that sense of a serious childhood, which is why I'm aiming to create these spaces for my own children, 3 and 6, and those I guide as an educator, 10 plus. Yeah. I do as well, actually. Anybody else want to respond to the question?
I can share too. Mine was similar to Sari. I became a little bit emotional because when you asked that question, I was just thinking like, wow, I don't think I ever had that. Or I don't think anyone ever valued my creativity as a schooled child, but then also as an educator. I think I thought like a conventional educator. And I think I thought that becoming a teacher, I would get to be really creative and create fun lessons and everything. And that never got to happen for me. And that wasn't, and even if I did do that, it wasn't valued. And now I think I still struggle with it in our learning space, in our community, that like what I do isn't or the creative things that I do don't have value. And so I need to do other things, right? Like I need to produce or clean or, all the other things that show something, that show that I'm doing something to give value to the community versus something that's coming from within myself.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Like, I can identify with that. I'm sure others can as well.
I'm thinking, go ahead, Richard.
No, go, Daniel.
Thank you. I'm thinking just there's like a lot that's kind of can be unspoken about just being valued in a group. And I really agree with, like, I think that everybody has something to add. Everybody has value to add to the group, the community. And that if we're not giving them space to be who they are, then they can't fully add to that. And thinking about like my childhood, I was in a previous session with Minachi, I think is her name, about intuition. And one of the things she said was, what's different now compared to when you were a child, when you were kind of a lot more connected with your intuition. And one thing that really came up to me was that my understanding and relationship to time is really different now. And I think as a child, like in the best case scenario, you don't have that, you're not super like pushed to time. And I feel that with my son and what I can give to him now, that he's like, it's not all right, it's creative time, and now it's work time, or something like that, where if it doesn't vibe with the child, then they're not performing in the space or time that they need to be. But my childhood was definitely that, like, kind of sectioned off, very siloed time for doing things and being creative. So it's a total loss of value in my thought.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Also, I think that kind of really, really jives with that idea that creativity is one thing and everything else falls outside of that. So it's only artistic, as opposed to, actually, even the word artistic is like really, we limit that unnecessarily. But there's much bigger. It can be much bigger than we silo creativity, is what I want to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
I just realized another British
sorry,
word.
I know. I can hear little lilts in your accent. You sound like you're Shropshire or towards Wales or something like that.
I know, I'm from the Caribbean. We just have the same kind of sing song, but I've lived here for as long as I lived there. So.
Okay, I'm down in Kent. Such a difficult question. This is such a huge question. It kind of, I read it, and then I read it again, then I read it about 3 or 4 times, and I'm like, God, what does this actually mean? I'm a facilitator in East Kent, Sudbury, and before that, I spent 25 years in the music industry as a session musician, musical director, and producer. And lockdown hit, and I had enough, and I just needed to do something a lot more real and down to earth. So I asked to be a facilitator in East Kent, Sudbury. So they took me on. I went in, loads of energy, bought in a big mixing desk, set up this music room, drum kit, keyboards, guitars. I kitted the place out, and it was amazing. And nobody turned up. Nobody came. Nobody used the room. And it was like so weird, because my interpretation of like a creative space wasn't their interpretation of a creative space. And I just basically took most of the stuff out of there, because they wanted to go in there and, just play tambourine and just play djembes and do stuff together. They didn't want to have the experience, what I thought was a creative experience. And so I was very humbled by the children and, the kind of position they kind of dictated for what they wanted as well. So what I thought was valuable to them after all my musical experience wasn't at all. Yeah.
That's very vulnerable of you to share. So it sort of reminds me of we had at one point a facilitator who was a games designer, and we thought that young people would want to learn games design with him, but actually they just wanted to play games with him.
I know your ego takes a little death, and then you have to kind of mourn that ego a little bit and move on.
But I think it's one of the important parts of this can be as making that visible as well, and sharing with them what's happening for us, allowing them to see our learning process, and that is our creative process as well, because you're learning creatively, creatively how to. It's what I think it was Sari was saying earlier about. No, it wasn't Sari. It was Natalie was saying about. Oh, I've lost the thread of what I was saying there. I might find it again. I think I was saying, yes, that there's a lot of creativity involved in what we're doing with them, is essentially what I was going to say. Did anyone else want to share on that question? How could you benefit from a group that sees you as creative and values you and values what you want to work on? Okay, well,
I just want to add, oh, sorry. Can I add one other reflection that I'm having now is like, I think when I feel most creative, there's almost like no outcome in mind. It's just pure process. And I think that we live in a world, in a society where it's so much about outcome. And then also going back to what I shared about like my upbringing, it was all about outcome and like avoiding certain outcomes and honoring others. And I think that what I'm recognizing, what's coming up for me in this is like where the magic happens is when there's like what you said, Dan, like there's no attachment to time. Like Richard, what you're saying, like there's no attachment to like a certain outcome, like a specific way that things have to be. It's just like this natural, and I don't know how to describe it. And I'm sure this is what you're gonna do, maybe Adele, but like just giving spaciousness, like giving space to what emerges versus having this idea of what it needs to be. And that energy is something that I'm inspired to like reflect more upon and hear how that's coming up for all of you and what supports folks to like get into that mindset.
So what I want to kind of share is a bit about how it's sort of working for people who, because what that is what an SDE space is trying to do, is trying to not put the limits on what it needs to be, not let the adults lead with right, okay, you're into this thing, therefore you need to do this thing, it needs to look like this. But what we're trying to do, especially as we're moving towards working with older ones who are kind of wanting to have some outcomes, they're wanting to have something that interacts with the real world, they're wanting to they are wanting to produce something. And how do we hold space for people who are moving into that zone, but also still protecting them from what the rest of the world might tell them that then needs to look like? And so that's something that we're trying to do, and it is something that has that involves nuance and inevitably involves mistakes. And I'll share some of those as well. I basically just want to share a little bit about like what the kinds of things that we've been doing, the things that we're going to be doing more as we're moving into the zone that we're moving in, and things that have worked well and things that have not, and how we've kind of worked through the things that haven't been working well. And it'd be great to hear from you as well. So I will ask more questions in a bit. So one of the practices that we've taken on is making plans. And this looks like lots of different things for different people. Sometimes it has involved having doing it through games, or through a group journaling, or just through conversation, helping people to kind of work, or maybe just one-to-one. Usually if it's one-to-one, it does need to be over a game because they need to not have the intensity of it feeling like an interview. And this is just helping people to think about, what might you like to do while you're here? What might you like to work on? What might you like to play with or discover? And I'm specifically thinking of ages 9+, maybe more like ages 10+, really, here. And they, within that, it's kind of it's working out what different people need with that, because some people don't want a plan. Like some people really do just want to just try a different thing each time and just show up and do what they want to do on that day. Or some people want a plan, but they don't actually they want to make a plan, but they don't actually want to do any of the stuff that they planned while in the space. It may be that they want to do that at home because while they're here, their priority is other things. Usually their priority is friends, basically. But then there are some people who they really want to have something, and this is like more like the 14+ crowd, who really want to have something that they're kind of bigger, that they're working on, and they might be more getting to the stage of wanting to break things into pieces and to set themselves goals, and to have projects that maybe look a little bit more familiar to adults, which means that we have to be very careful that we don't then take it and run away with it and try to shape it into something that it's not meant to be. And one of the things that I found is really important with this process is to keep reminding that you don't have to stick with a plan, and you can let go, you can step back from something, and that's part of the creative process as well. It's a really important part of the creative process, is to quit things and to release things and try different things, and not to have any negativity around that. So we talk a lot about when do you decide to stick with something, and when do you decide to quit something. And we talk about things like sunk cost, like how much time and energy and resources you may have put into something could be a reason to see it through, or it might be a reason to stop, because you might continue to sink things into something that has run its course, and it's time for it to be shifted aside for you to explore something new. So all of that is part of the plan making process, is just having conversations about these things. And a lot of it is thinking about like what is useful for me. So being willing to, as the person who's holding the space, to be really reflective, but also open and honest, and share your working. So like as you were saying, Richard, like with what went on with that whole scenario is very humbling for you. That might be really cool for the young people who you work with to hear about how that felt for you. Yeah. But they're going to have situations where they do something like that, and it's really hideous, and it's, you know, that is such a powerful thing for them to hear it from an adult who has been there and suffered it at their hands. So, well, not really, it's not their doing, it's just part of the whole thing. So we found with this that it does help to have some sort of, oh, sorry. Yeah, sorry, you want to say something?
I'm curious, and maybe this is not the space for it, and there's resources you can share, but when you think about games for making plans, like what those look like.
Yeah, okay, so one that comes to mind is it was kind of get to know you games. So and it's to help people to start thinking about, because sometimes you can start off with making plans like, what are your interests? Nothing. It's just crickets. That is exactly what happens to me when somebody asks a question like that. I then have no interest. So, but get to know you games like allies, where you can say that it's going to be specifically things that we like doing, or even maybe things that we are enjoying doing at the moment, or things that we wish that we could do. And that's been a really cool one to work with. Also, never have I ever, but again, theme it, or just any of those, you know, that sort of genre of game. Guess who, where you everyone has to write something and then you guess who said it. But the great thing about doing it that way, or even if you do it with sort of a journal prompt and then people share it, like I mean, that's a more serious way to do it, and that does depend on the group and the ages and whether people are reading and writing. But although they can draw as well. But any of those ways that you any way where you're doing it and you're sharing it in a group, or I'd say I guess you could do this with siblings as well. But my 11-year-old is really at a stage where they really need to be with similar age peers, and yeah, their younger siblings don't really don't count in the same way, unfortunately. It's just the stage, but it means that there's a lot of cross-pollination that happens, and it's also doing that thing of it's a space where it allows for you to really affirm what people's interests are, and it may be that a young person comes in space and it's the first time that they've heard that gaming is taken seriously as that is a valid pursuit, or what, you know, whatever they're into. They might find and I think it's really important for adults to share their plans as well, and first not to just be kind of saying, okay, this is something that I'm doing for you, but first to actually be entering into it as well. So my thing this term has been making TikTok videos, which the young people have found very, very funny, and have given me some very serious feedback about it as well. But or I'm supposed to be playing some songs at a friend's birthday thing, and so I play for them, and they're gradually hearing me get from terrible to slightly better, and and that's good for them to see as well. Yeah, so I think all of that's the point of sharing, and if you can do it in a playful way, and if you can do it in a light-hearted way where you are involved as well, then that really helps. They need our vulnerability. I think that's such an important part of this, and we need that as well, because otherwise we're not going to actually be creative ourselves. It doesn't work unless you're willing to open up like that. So the other thing that we found specifically with people who are kind of moving into this zone is that it helps to have some kind of structure, but it needs to be a structure that is consensually agreed. It can't just be something that the adult comes and decides this is what's going to happen. The way that we have done it has been that the adults do decide on some things, but then we kind of work it out together and check that everyone is able to at least live with trying something to start with. And there have been some hiccups with it. So when we first started, one of the things that we did was we said, why don't we have a part of the day where everybody takes turns sharing an interest, and then we'll have another part of the day where we all work on a group project. And that actually turned out to have super mixed results, because what we found was that the older people on the older end of the spectrum, so sort of 12, 13, 14, really struggled to have an interest in the 9-year-olds' interests, basically, because they were kind of already been there, done that. So I think it probably could work. I'm just being honest that for us, we decided as a group to move on from doing that. And instead, they said, actually, we do want to have a section of the day where we're working on our own thing, but we just wanted to just be a calm time where we can all talk about what we want to do, and then just do that for a while. So the way that we do it is we have some people might have a bigger plan that they've set, and they decide that I'm going to work on this bit today. Or some people might just show up and say, actually, I know that I made a plan, but I don't really care about it, and I just want to do this instead today. But it is a focus hour, and it kind of goes against what you were sort of saying, Dan, about like having that time, and then it being sort of like you're only allowed to be creative in that time. It's not like that, but we have found that for like a lot of people do really appreciate having a time where they are almost co-working alongside their friends, and like we're all doing something, and then we're going to check in afterwards on how it's gone. And there's a lot of conversations about like not viewing that as pressure, or not feeling that you definitely have to have achieved a thing, unless that's something that you decide you really want to do. Because some people want to have like a fire under them, is particularly kind of the older ones, more like 14. They want to have a fire under them to get something done that they've been trying to do all week and just not getting around to doing. But then if they don't get it done, then we have conversations about, well, like why, and maybe that's valuable too. And sometimes we overestimate how much we can get done in a certain amount of time, and actually sometimes it takes a longer time to slip into something. So
Adele, sorry to interrupt. Are they through these activities, are they aware of the question that you've presented?
you mean the first question? Or how could you benefit from a group that sees you as creative and values you?
Yeah, so if a group of children were involving themselves in an activity, would they be holding what they can benefit out of the group in mind, as well as what they can bring to the group?
Yeah, so we don't, at anything we do is kind of you need to see the point of if there's going to be a structure, then you need to see the point of it. So it needs to have a purpose. Otherwise, you can't really consent it if you don't know what the purpose is. So yeah, we do talk about that, and like have a conversation about it, rather than just sort of like just say this is why it's happening. But But we also talk about, like, are there other ways that you think that this could be achieved? Do you want to try it this way first, and then we can try it another way? How do you want to do it? So that's how the consent piece sort of works. But this is how it's kind of evolved for us, and the idea of the focus hour actually came from some of the older ones, and I was very, very dubious about it because it felt very schooly for me to sort of say, right, we're going to have an hour where everyone has to be calm and quiet. No, I'm not saying that, but like, that's the general vibe. Everybody knows that that's what we're doing for that time. And what are you going to work on in this hour? And at the end, let's chat about how you got on. And then I realized that actually, for me, I'm really reacting to my own schooling in being worried about that, because I sort of have gone from one extreme to the other. Is that I experienced schooling, and now that I'm unschooling, it's like anything that looks like structure or anything is really scary. Whereas most of the young people who I'm working with don't have those hang-ups, and haven't experienced, they haven't experienced the school trauma that I have. And so for them, it kind of works more the way that a writing group would work for me, where it can be, I mean, I say that I can't actually write alongside other people, but a writing group might work for some people who were able to pay attention, where you have the focus of you're working alongside other people, and sort of you're feeding off each other's creative energy. They don't always work sort of solitary, like it does sort of, like, different things kind of happen. So there are a couple of people who are working on some digital art projects this week, a couple of people who they have been writing a story together, because one of them is learning to read, and the other one learning to read and write, and the other one can read and write really well. And so they decided to team up and write a story together, because the one who is still learning to read is wanted to write the story. So they're kind of lending skills to each other with that. And then they wanted to turn it into an audiobook, and I left the microphone home. So they decided that they were going to move on to creating characters for this comic that they're now gonna put together. And there's this whole lore that's emerged and stuff. So it's not that you have to sit and do something on your own, but the idea is that this is a space where we're going to set a goal, and then just check in afterwards on how it is. And it might be linked to a bigger plan that you have, because you might be in that place in your life where you want to do that sort of thing, or it might not, either because you're not in that place, or because you just don't feel like that today. And Sarah, you
sorry, and sorry, was somebody?
Just because it's linked to what we were saying before, agree with making the implicit explicit supports anyone to make sense of what and why they are doing things. Yeah, I think that's we're an ALC, so we do that's something we really have in mind about making the implicit explicit.
And how do you lay out at the beginning the if they don't achieve something? Is there a sense of failure, or is there a sense of not achievement or something?
No, because the way that I sort of counteract that from the start is I tend to talk about the fact that I often can't achieve anything in these times. And that just the act of sort of being together allows me to do things outside of the time that we're together. And we also talk about, like, what it is that you really want to get out of the time together. For some people, it is that they just really want to get this thing done, and they've been trying all week, and finally they're in a space where they have the energy around them, and they have the time where they can focus, and they can get it done. And then for other people, we do talk about it, that you may just do a little bit, or you may get started and realize that actually you weren't ready for that bit yet. Maybe you wanted to look at some more videos first, or maybe you felt like you needed to have a conversation first. I mean, that's part of why I also don't achieve very much, because often I do need to chat with people. So, and we talk about sometimes some people do take longer to drop into that focus time. And so it's also, if the hour is up and you want to continue, that's fine as well. And other people need to give you space to be able to do that. Yeah, so it's a sense, do find that some people do like the sense of working towards something, particularly if they haven't been traumatized by school, and if that something isn't something that's been artificially brought in by an adult. So when we worked on, I'm trying to think of what examples to sort of pull with this. We created a funny horror film last term, and they really wanted it to be done in 6 weeks because they wanted it to be done in time to show the rest of the community before we broke up. And I was really honest with them that I thought the 6 weeks was quite ambitious for what they were trying to do, but they really loved the idea that we were going to have like this, that it was going to happen in this short. They liked the momentum, and the kind of the fact that it was going to be shared, and that people were going to find it really funny. It was really funny. We did have, I invited a friend who's a filmmaker to come in to sort of talk a little bit about the process and about the fact that it generally takes a lot longer than you think. But they were very sad that we are going to do it in this time. So it ended up being like, my role ended up being a little bit naggy, because I knew that they wanted to get it done in this time. And I had to really kind of work out what the parameters were with that. And I did keep checking in with them, like, how does this feel to you? Because I'm not sure that this is supposed to be my role. And they said, no, we want you to do this because you're helping us to get it done on time. And we can't do it in this time unless you do that. And so then it felt okay because the explicit consent was there. On the other hand, like last year, we were digging a veg patch, because they went, well, not digging because we do no dig. We were creating a veg patch. Actually, we did have to do a bit of digging because it was full of blackberries, so we needed to get those up. But we were doing that, and because it was a lot of hard graft, everybody left the situation apart from me. And so I kept bringing them back to it, and it just didn't feel good to me at all. And eventually I had to say to them, I kind of do enough gardening outside of here. I don't really want to do that here. So unless this is something that you really want to do, can we just leave it? And they said, yeah, we don't really want to do it anymore, but because you're so committed. So it's kind of working out where, where it's I think it's that intuition. It's intuitively feeling, but also explicitly asking helps you to figure out like what your role is in helping them to work towards something. Had to do a little bit of pushing with this art exhibition that we were doing as well, because there was an external limit with that, which is that we had promised the gallery that we would give them the work by this time, and they had saved the space for us, and so we really needed to honor that. And but that was really easy because that was just about explaining that, showing them the emails and explaining to them that this is how it works and this is what the curator will do, and and then we'll go for the launch and all of that stuff. So that made sense. But because it's holding it in a way where it's but it's not so much pressure that it's never a situation where you can't back out if you need to. So, and we have had things where people have been working on something and they've been really excited about doing it together. And some people have needed to say, okay, I've done enough of that now. And then we just check with who's left if they want to continue with it. And they've said, actually, we're really happy to just crack on our own. And it's faster if we just do it now on our own. And that's how it works that's how it works for us as adults when we're working on things a lot of the time. Like, not all of us are meant to do all of the things. Like, a lot of the time when we're working on something with people, it's best for us to just do the bit that we're excited about and that we're good at, and let somebody else finish if that's what's possible. Sorry?
I'm curious if you've ever experienced, and if so, how you've navigated there being pressure from within the group, like in past creative projects that we've done, like theater, for example, where there is a deadline, and sometimes I've noticed like there are some young people that especially if they come from more conventional settings, that they get very like controlling with the group, you know, like we have to do this, we have to do that. And like how, I'm curious if that's come up for you. And again, if this is not the time to answer that question because you have things you need to share, I totally respect and honor that and welcome any other form of response from that.
I feel like it's best for people to bring things up as they as they come up, because I will never remember, and you might not either, so we might as well as it comes up. Yeah, trying to think of where that may have come up. Maybe it hasn't come up. Maybe that's why it's taking me a while. Yeah,
That's
I don't
awesome.
has come up. I think it's because the people who've gone to school haven't been to school for a long time. So I think that that's probably just our experience, but it's really worth, thank you for raising that as a possibility, because that might be something that comes up. That might be something that comes up later on. Yeah, and I have heard about that with another learning community I was chatting with a few weeks ago. They were saying that they were having this issue of some people, like they were doing a play as well. Like maybe it's a thing about plays where some people really wanted to get it done, and then other people were really over it, and they just couldn't work out what their role within that was. And I was just like, oh, just let it go. And then I realized I wasn't really listening to what they were saying about, but some people really want to get it done. I think with situations where we've had some people, we've not had an issue with a deadline, but when some people have wanted to carry on with something and other people haven't, we've had a discussion around how can we make it so that it feels good to everyone, so that the people who want to continue don't feel abandoned, and so that it doesn't feel to those who have left as if they've dropped out, but how can it continue to feel like a good process for everyone. And well, in one of the solutions, it was the end product, as long as everybody's name was on it and everybody felt okay about it. And that was a solution that emerged from them, not from me. We have something that they're wanting to work on that I know that we're not going to have time for as we head towards the end of term. So I'm going to be suggesting that we think about how can we take this big project and scale it down. And I'm sure that they'll have a solution to that as well. But I need to walk them through what my concerns are, and then it may be that they decide that they want to go for it anyway, and then the learning will be that maybe I will learn that actually I need to not underestimate what can happen, or it may be that it doesn't get finished, and we all learn to live with that as well. Yeah. Documenting has been a really useful part for some people, not for all people. Not everybody likes to do documenting, but we found that some people do like to do documenting, as in they like to make little notes about things that they've done, or things that they might want to try as they come up. Or sometimes it's because they want to remember how they've done something, because they think that they might not remember. And this was something that I was also reluctant to do, because I was worried that it was quite schooly. And then I realized that that's just my own hang-ups, and actually I document everything. I have lots of notebooks and I write down everything that comes up. And so it's been, we've tried to make some set time for those who want to do it to do that, and to talk about like the different ways that they can do it and the different reasons why somebody might do that, so that people can consider whether they want to do it. Particularly the older ones are doing it, and that sort of makes sense to me, because I think they're heading towards the time where they will want to share what they know with others for whatever it is that they're going to be doing as they're getting older. So we're experimenting with that and trying different ways of doing that. We also talk a lot about like the fact that there are so many jobs where you're not necessarily going to need to have exam results, but being able to share what you've done or share the kinds of stuff that you're capable of is actually going to be more useful. And so we're sort of playing with different ways that people might do that. We have a lot of people who are really into photography, really into filming. So it may be that that's the way that they want to do it. But then equally, there are other people who are really into notebooking, and they have really creative ways of doing that. So we just try to make sure that there is some time for that in case there's anyone who wants to do that, because it may be that that they sort of speed off and then they say, oh, I wish I could remember what I did, or I wish I'd taken a moment. They're a lot better at remembering to do this than I am, actually, because I'm very on to the next thing. Like great, end of the day, let's hang out. But there's some who say no, let's take a picture of everybody in their costumes for the memories. So I'm glad that they remember that better than I do. Yeah, so I was gonna say that another important we've sort of talked a bit about like making sure you're participating in the process yourself rather than just standing outside of it and being the adult for the young people having fun. You are a person in the space. You are also a learner in the space. You're also a creative in the space, and that's an incredible privilege to be in this really generative space yourself. But because we're trying to do, we are doing a lot of things which look very productive in the, we could be doing a lot of things, or some of them are a lot of things that look productive in the sense that the wider world see it. We do have to have a lot of conversations around like stopping and checking how it actually feels for you, and going through the different ways that you might check, like how is it feeling for your body, how are you feeling at the end of the day. Is there something that you might like to do differently? Did you feel that you were actually too busy? Did you feel like your day needed to have more space? Did you need to have more fun? Do you feel like actually you would have liked to have had more time, more focused time? So getting people to assess for themselves what their needs are, and to recognize that all of us are different. And within that, I might notice things for myself that that I felt like I got too hung up on this part of the process, or this I feel I don't actually feel very settled within myself, or that I feel really, really good, and like this was, and I had, it was a full and wonderful day, or it was just spacious enough, or whatever it is. But it's making sure to do the checking with the feelings, and going through not just the head and not just the emotions, but what is the physical body saying, and then also, are there ways of helping the emotions move through the body, if that's something that's needed, helping to express in different ways. That's actually something that we start the day with as well, and we say that's social and emotional and physical elements is as important a part of what we're doing as any of the structures or any of the conversations. It's you can't have, it's not separate. And actually having a set group of people who you're doing this with, people who you're creating alongside, is a really important part of feeling safe enough to create, and feeling that you can trust the people who you work with. And it expresses itself in interesting ways. So like we might be doing we might get a guest artist in to do like drawing alongside each other, and then people start like playing a game of whispers while they're drawing, or like the big thing is talking about what's sus. So yeah, and that might happen while people are working on something together. I always feel like that's the difference between doing this with a set group and just dropping into some random workshop, is that you're working on so many different levels at the same time, and there's so many different parts of you that are getting airtime And then making time for reflection and feedback has also been an important part of what we're doing, and making sure that it's a reflection for yourself, but also in the context of the group, and feedback from your peers, not from the adults in the space necessarily, although we can give feedback as we're part of the community as well. And there's been a few ways that we've done this. So we give people different options for how they'd like to receive it. So we did this a bit when we were doing our art exhibition, but wish we'd done more of it, where we paused. We would be working on things together, and then we would pause and let different people share what they were doing, and people would make suggestions or notice things that they loved about it, or ask questions, and that proved a really useful. Well, each person said that was really useful for them in figuring out what they wanted to do next, or whether, like, maybe realizing that they were done with it as well. That actually those questions helped them to realize that I don't need to do anything else. That I'm actually fine now. Or when somebody has shared something to a group, we might suggest, would you like to receive feedback verbally, or would you like it to be written? And when people have asked for it to be written, then we sort of explain like kinds of things that you might put in the feedback, and also making sure that like anything you're putting in there is something that you would be happy to read. And then we'll put it in a little envelope, and that person can take it home and read it in their own home. And people have really loved that as well. They've really enjoyed that, and some of them have said that they've kept it. And it's been a powerful that's been a powerful bit of having their interest recognized as well. For one young person, it was when he was showing like some circus skills, and we hadn't realized it, but it was the first time that he'd ever shown anybody his circus skills outside of his family. And then receiving feedback from his peers was a real confidence builder for him, because it meant that we were taking it seriously, what he'd done. So I have another question, which is, what challenges do you see emerging from trying to hold a space like this? And actually, I'll put the other question at the same time, and people can say. But the other question is, what challenges do you think you might experience as a creative in this space?
I guess I have a couple of thoughts on this. One, right off the bat, and we kind of talked a little bit about it, was that a little kind of deschooling that I needed on my part, that when planning fizzles out a lot, when often, like, you know, the children I'm around, my son in particular, is really ambitious and is like really intense when, like, you know, the fire hits him to do something, and then a week later in my head I'm like, told you so, like, this, I knew this wasn't going to happen, I was trying to tell you in the moment. So just kind of letting go of those outcomes. And I don't necessarily think that, like, I'm addressing your question there, but that's one thing that I feel like families kind of moving along that sort of SDE spectrum are dealing with. And so maybe even parents in this respect, that's one thing that they're looking for the outcomes. But another thing that I'm snowballing a little bit, because I know a little bit about like SDE centers, and I've never been to one. I've never been in one. But I think maybe one of maybe a couple of the challenges are, one is that when you create a structure, and the structure that you've talked about is really interesting, and I think that's well thought out, and it's like, you know, your best intentions, but to be like the devil's advocate, if possible, is that I think there is value in knowing the opposite of that structure as well and experiencing that. Because when we set up something perfect for kids, and maybe it's like, let's say it's perfect and individualized for the kids that are in our group, then they're like, oh, this is great. But then it's kind of like, okay, this works for us, instead of like, why doesn't this work for us and how can we change it? So that's just one thought. And then another thought, again, because I've never been like an SDE facilitator, just like an unschooling parent. So I don't have to tailor to parents, but I know what that's like, having been like a preschool teacher in a really like play-based area, a play-based space. I know what that's like, and I consider myself a very creative person. And when I could follow kids to kind of make a curriculum in the center that I was in, I often found that I still wanted to follow the children, but my motivations sometimes had to be suppressed, and sometimes that was like a little tricky for me. If I'm part of the community, then like how much should I be suppressing to kind of empower the youth around me, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, thank you for sharing both of those. Well, it wasn't just two things you mentioned. Thank you for sharing all of those things. I feel like I do need to give a little caveat that we do run just 2 days a week. So yeah, people are doing all sorts outside of the time that we're together, and the people who come are people who have consented to there being a structure, so it wouldn't suit everybody.
Yeah, I think that's one of the sort of massive reasons for for those students that come to you, for them to be involved in something is the time. They've got 2 days. If they're there for 5 days, then they've got a lot of time. And it's hard to when children are there in a setting like in the Sudbury school. I mean, we're open 3 days, but they do Mondays and Fridays doing other things as well. Yeah, so they feel that sometimes if they're in for a short period of time, they just want to play, they just want to interact with their friends because they do other stuff outside of the setting. But it's interesting what Daniel was saying about the value of knowing the opposite of what it is, even if they don't, but as a facilitator, to kind of hold space and be, okay, this is your creativity, and this is what we're going to do, and this is the antithesis of it. To kind of have an awareness of where those boundaries are for you yourself. And often the children, they tend to jump outside that very quickly and explore, other avenues that you haven't even considered or looked at. It's another really difficult question, Adele.
Well, one of the things you're welcome. One of the things that very careful to keep mentioning as well is that it's not just the focus hour or the group project that is the creative time, but the unstructured time is the creative time, the hanging out, the playing, the eating together, like all of that stuff is also equally valuable, and a thing that we really talk about, and that actually you can't do this bit if you don't do this bit, because it won't work. And in fact, one of the things when we talked about changing the structure to be more of this rather than the trying to do everything, the suggestion was that we could drop to 1 day, and I had to say no, we definitely can't, because otherwise we won't have the time to just be, and to just enjoy each other's company and get to know each other. And yes, you get to know each other like working together, but it's not the complete thing. So
Sure.
yeah.
Can I add a little bit more?
I do see what you. I just want to say something that I do see that one of the things that we found is that people who have very structured lives outside of the time with us, and this is one of the reasons why, because the project is having to shrink, because for so many reasons I won't get into here, but when trying to do the whole big thing, what we have found is that there are a lot of people who, if they have really structured time outside of the days that they're with us, then they absolutely don't want any sort of structured stuff when they're with us. And actually that's not what they need when they're with us. They need rest, and they need play.
Yeah, super interesting. We offer a lot of stuff that the children actually vote for, and we timetable it in, you know, from like creative things, artwork, we do music, we've got a forest school that runs the whole time, and cooking, there's a big kitchen there, you know, so there's a lot of things to do. And the children are always, there's certain children who are always involved in something, and then there's certain children who just opt out. And I think perhaps, you know, listening to what you're saying, perhaps there's too much on for them, you know, and there is a space for them to actually just opt out and just sit and be quiet or whatever. But yeah, that's really interesting to, you know, it sounds like what you're saying is you're putting on one specific topic or one specific event, and within that then there's a lot of other things, but that's the one focal point that draws them to the nucleus, kind of thing. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I'm not saying that that's what anyone else should do. I'm just saying that this is what is working, and this is what we're putting more into. And I think it's partly because of one of the things Ari said was having a physical space that supports creative processes, and we have just we have just one room, and lots of outdoor space, but at this time of year everyone wants to be inside. And so that is one of the reasons why on the third day, when people opt into this structure, which is the kind of structure we've been talking about, like there'll be people who say, I've been trying to get to this all week, and this is their third day, because we haven't the optional third day. I've been trying to get to this all week. And when you say, well, would you like for us to have a focus hour on one of the other days? No, it won't work, because there are lots of people who are rushing around. So it's, you know, it's tricky. I just wanted to check in with Janice said, my biggest challenge when wanting to tap into my own creativity is that I don't want to be interrupted, which can be really hard in certain situations. So one of the things that I have to really do is remind myself that that I am going to respond with grace when I'm interrupted, because I get really irritable when I'm getting into something and then somebody calls me out of it. So I do feel you. And some of my challenges is to find the balance and also the opportunity to dive into my own creative process while holding space for conflict resolution, admin, social emotional support. Oh my goodness. Yes. Yes, I really, really hear that. And I think that we can make that visible as well. That we can say, well, you know, I don't have as much space to delve into this as you guys do, because I am doing all of these different things. And I mean, they see that anyway, but you know, I think talking about it is a useful thing. And it could be useful chatting about, like, why are they not getting around to the things that they want to do? Is it that they're holding space for things that they might not even be aware of? Or is it that they have responsibilities that they're not aware of? And maybe they, you know, even just being able to talk about that could be useful. So thinking about things that are difficult, but could be difficult about holding and hold a space like this. Actually, maybe that is a good one for us to talk about, because I know that this is something that is coming up for a lot of, certainly in the UK, there are a lot of SDE centres which have got started off some time ago, where everybody was like 5 and 6. And now everybody is a lot older. And so we're now all starting to reckon with the same questions of, but how do we do this for those who are older and actually are wanting to do more focused things, because they don't have the same kind of, you know, they don't have to do the same kind of deschooling that we have to do, or because it's just it's just developmentally the stuff that we're working on. How do we hold space for that, maybe in a center where there are lots of other people who are not there yet, or just are not going to be there because that's just not what they're like. I mean, apart from having the physical space, it's a bit of a conundrum. So I don't know if anybody wants to speak to like how you do that in your home, or how you do that in your space. I don't know what everybody is doing.
So could you slightly rephrase that?
Yeah, I knew that was
question?
waffly. So is it possible to hold a kind of a more focused space to do these kinds of things in a center or a home where there are other people who are not wanting that, but maybe there are some people who do?
I can share on what we've been doing in our space.
Thank you.
We're lucky because we have like 5 different rooms, and they're almost like small classrooms. So we've dedicated one of the rooms to more of like a quiet space, or a space where we hold our offerings. And we find that the kids who want to do projects or want to work on something specific, they choose that room to go into. The challenge is, though, that, you know, when we have offerings and certain kids sign up and then certain people don't sign up, it's like they feel like they're going to miss out on something. So they say, well, if I do this offering, then there might be something really fun happening outside, and I'm going to miss that because not everybody's doing the offering. So then some people kind of drop off before we start the offering, or they say, well, never mind, you know, I did want to do that, but I don't want to do it anymore. So that's the challenge, is that when not everybody's doing having focus at the same time, they can feel like they're missing out.
Do you find as well that that because it involves going to a separate space, that because what we find sometimes is that having an offering in the main space means that people who wouldn't consider it ahead of time, they see it happening and then they sort of join in, because that's the way that they roll. They don't plan ahead, they just go with what's in front of them. Does that become more challenging for those people as well, if it's in a separate space, that they then make some plans?
Yeah, I noticed that we have this big like main room, and sometimes I'll do offerings in there, and that's what I notice, is that when those offerings are happening, more kids join because they walk by and they're like, oh, that looks really fun. Yeah, so when we have it in the separate space, there's not as many people joining, you know, after we start. And the hard part of having it in the main space is that there's a lot of distractions and it can get loud. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's tricky. I think we're trying to do like really amazing, multifaceted things. Well, I'm shrinking just to do this thing because this is the thing that I can do. But I think in general, what SDE centers are doing is really quite incredible. But there's a lot of learning as well in like working out whether. I think that's really powerful to work out whether do I still want to do that thing, or is being with my friends the priority. Sometimes, you know, being able to say actually being with my friends is a priority is in itself a really powerful learning and developmentally appropriate and right for that person that day. And that's something that us as adults, we have to, our learnings that we've got to learn to let go.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's so hard because it's like, well, I planned this and and it was around your interest, but now you don't want to do it. And it's really hard to experience that. But it's a good point that, like, yes, it's definitely appropriate and also a really good experience for them to have to be able to choose.
Yeah, I mean, I've got to the stage where as long as it's not something that's required a lot of planning, I don't really mind. But it is a lot more it's a lot trickier if it's a young person who has planned it and is giving it, and you really want to make sure that people do show up. So joy of missing out is a reframe. Yeah, I've got to learn that as an adult as well. Like we've all got to learn. Yeah, and we can have conversations about that as well. You can have conversations about, yes, you want to do this thing, just so you are aware this is the only time this other thing is happening. And could the thing that you want to do happen outside of this time? So is that truly what you want to do? What you want to do today? And make that a real question, as opposed to like a question that's actually trying to guide somebody into the outcome that you think it should have. Yeah, but it's the same for like when we do the focus hours. Like sometimes people don't want to do anything. They want to just they want to go outside and just hang out, and that's cool as well, as long as the intention is that the space is the intention of the time is held for those who want it. That's kind of what we found has been the value of it. Yeah, I think that's we're probably, yeah, we've got 4 minutes, so I don't know if anybody wants to say any last things. I realized that was like a kind of a jumble of things. There's a lot going on at this end at the moment, but I hope that there have been lots of things that people can kind of go in and think, and obviously leave anything that doesn't work for you as well.
No, just we're so fortunate at Sudbury. We've got so much space, and we've got space to accommodate like 20 people staying over. We've got huge grounds and everything like that. So I'm just extending an invitation to anybody who'd like to come and stay at our setting. Just come, drop us an email or through the website or something, and yeah, come and visit and hang out.
Yeah, Kate has invited us to come over actually, so we may be coming next term.
Oh, fantastic. Brilliant. Excellent.
Say you are a long way, but then you're even further for the other people on this call, so.
Yeah, exactly. Can't go much further where we are. We just fall in the sea and end up in France. So
We're in Cornwall, which is on the other corner, so.
yeah, brilliant.
Sorry.
Thanks, Adele. I just want to share that it really feels that you have and continue to create such a lovely, intentionally creative culture there in your community. And I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's really beautiful and inspiring, very inspiring.
Thank you. That's very yeah, that's really lovely. Thank you.